Good day everyone, I am Rika Zenjin Elam and my topic for today is about the Hindu literature. In this topic, I will feature its characteristics, discuss the caste system, the religion, the various sect, and Nirvana. For the remaining topics, it will be discussed by my partner who is Leia Dana.
Hindu literature. This is one of the oldest literature. It is estimated that the first record emerged more than 4,000 years ago in what is now India and in some regions of Pakistan. It is also known as Sanskrit literature because most of the pieces are written in Sanskrit ancient language consisting of several types of scriptures. In general terms, Hindu literature talks about wisdom, religion, worship, and social norms, themes that were treated throughout the writings. It should be noted that the oldest writings found are compiled in a book called Vedas, or from the term truth, and this became the basis of the Hindu religion. An essential feature of this literature is the linguistic, mythical, and religious richness through which it widely collects the history of a region since its genesis, taking into account different types of language as well as the manifestation of other cultures and practices that nourished it. The first manifestation of Hindu literature were intimately related to religion. Then while the genre was developing, the works began to cover other topics, even in contrast to the doctrinal material characteristic of the first expression of this literature. Now let's move on to its origins and history. The first manifestations of Hindu literature are known from the emergence of the Vedas. A series of ancient writings arose between 1600 and 700 BC, which were preserved because they are the basis of what would later be Hinduism. The Vedas, they contemplate a series of rituals, precepts, myths, and chants that were originally transmitted orally. Later, this would be written to be used in rituals heeded by the ancient priest. Then, the post-Vedic period was characterized by the presence of new doctrines that served to contradict some of the postulates that were raised in the Vedas. It should be noted that it was at this time that the two most important works of Hindu literature were composed, which is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Ramayana, this is relatively short text that focuses on compiling the philosophical and theological teachings of Prince Rama, who suffers a series of misadventures with the intention of saving his wife who is in the hands of the demon Ravana. On the other hand, Mahabharata, this is considered as the second longest work in universal literature, since it contains more than 200,000 verses. This work contemplates a mixture of narrations, myth, and advice made in different styles and by different authors. Currently, it can be considered as the kind of Bible for Hindus. After this stage, the Brahminical period was consolidated, which served as a kind of transition between Veda and the Hindu religion. In this historical moment, we also talk about the division of society by castes and the principles of interaction between them. In this current, the most laws of Manu, a book where the main rules of conduct, the functioning of karma and punishment are indicated. There were four main stages in the formation and development of Hindu literature, from its beginnings to the present. The characteristics of each of these stages are detailed below. First is the Adhika literature. The main expression of this literature was poetry, focusing in turn on religiosity and heroic stories. Next is the literature Bhakti Kal. This was developed between the 14th and 17th centuries. At this stage begins the process of highlighting the importance of God consciousness, although records of epic poems have also been found. And they are thankful to the Islamic presence at that time because it is possible to find the influence of religion in various artistic expressions. The third one is the rhetorical literature. This period developed between 1600 and 1850 DC. Rhetorical literature emphasizes the power of love and other emotions throughout the poems made at the time. Lastly is the Adonical literature. It was developed from the mid-19th century to the present. It is divided into four phases: the Renaissance, Dvivedi Yuga, Shayavada Yuga, and the contemporary period. Different styles and literary genres are explored, such as drama, comedy, criticism, and novel, short stories, and nonfiction. Now let's talk about its main characteristics. Despite the convergence of different styles, languages, and religious manifestations, it is possible to point out some general characteristics of Hindu literature. The vast majority of the texts speak of gods and the benefits that men get when they are granted a favor from them. Likewise, they also relate the punishments they must assume for improper conduct, and this reflects the importance of religious content. The elements that interact with man, both inanimate objects or not, have their own personality and qualities. Next is the story seek for leaves some kind of value teaching for the reader. There is an intention to explain the origins of the world, so it is usual to find stories that talk about it. There is an accumulation of fantastic facts in which beings with supernatural and extraordinary qualities intervene. The protagonists of these stories have special and very unique features. They are gods or divine reincarnations. They have great beauty, courage, and admirable moral behavior. There is an emphasis on the fact that the balance of the universe depends on the respect that is given to all the living beings that live together. Any action taken against any of them will affect the next life. Now let's move on to its social context. Brahmanism was a religion of transition between the Veda period and the settlement of Hinduism. However, some of its postulates who have a great impact in Hindu literature. During the period 1st century BC approximately, a caste classification was established that is still maintained today. This categorization is done as follows. First is priests and students of literature, which is the Brahmins, warriors, businessmen, and peasants, including slaves and the invisible considered as subhuman. The social dynamic gave way to the creation of new texts that would indicate the functioning and behavior of the members of each caste. These precepts were exposed in the so-called Dharma Sastras, which are books of the norms and social laws. Although the country suffered the Islamic invasions, which also contributed to the enrichment of the arts, and British, this social system would continue to be a part of the national and cultural identity, while rejecting the presence of other, more Western models. The caste system, this is India's world's oldest forms of surviving social stratification. The system which divides Hindus into rigid hierarchical groups based on their karma or work, and dharma, the Hindi word for religion, but here it means duty, is generally accepted to be more than 3,000 years old. The caste system divides Hindus into four main categories: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Shudras. Many believe that the group originated from Brahma, which is the Hindu god of creation. At the top of the hierarchy were the Brahmins, who were mainly teachers and intellectuals and are believed to have come from Brahma's head. Then came the Kshatriyas, or the warriors and rulers, supposedly from his arms. The third slot went to the Vaishyas, or the traders, who were created from his thighs. At the bottom of the heap were the Shudras, who came from Brahma's feet and did all the menial jobs. The main castes were further divided into about 3,000 castes and 25,000 sub-castes, each based on their specific occupation. Outside of this Hindu caste system were the Achyuts, or the Dalits, or the Intouchables in English. Contemporary Hindu literature. The current presents a significant change in relation to the ancient literature. One characteristic is the need for independence and rebellion against the British, led by the pacifist precepts proposed by Mahatma Gandhi. At that point, there is evidence of a return to Hinduism and Buddhism, religions that have millions of faithful followers so far. Also, they are thankful to the influence of the West because Hindu literature was open to new expressions and styles. Not only would it be limited to poetry, but it would also diversified into non-fiction, drama, satire, and the making of short stories. Here are the 6 most representative authors of Hindu literature. Among the most important authors of Hindi literature include the following. First is Valmiki. He is a writer of the Ramayana, which is one of the most popular books of India and of Hindu literature in general. Next is Kalidasa. He is a writer of religious and devotional literature. He is also an author of the Sanskrit play, which is Sankuntala. The third one is Chanakya. He is a Brahmin and a writer of the Sanskrit text Artha Shastra, one of the most important treatises on how a state should function. In these states, that practices such as the use of prison against the enemy or the death penalty for serious crime are valid. Next is Dhanpat Rai Srivastav. He is also known as Prem Chandan. He is considered one of the most prominent writers of Hindu literature. In his works, they include short stories, essays, and translations. He is the author of works recognized as Panch Parameshwar, Ega I Sivasadan. The fifth one is Rasipuram Krishna Swami Layar Naranaya Swami, or also known as R.K. Narayan. He stood out for writing fiction and non-fiction books, among which stand out Swami and His Friends, Harish Hamilton, The Dark Room in Waiting for Mahatma. The last one is Rabindranath Tagore. He is a Bengali writer who left an extensive legacy of works that revolutionized Hindu and Bengali literature. It was characterized by spontaneous prose, considered by some as sensual. He was also the author of the titles such as The King and the Queen, The New Moon or Harvest, and won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913.